Alrighty. Hey, I wanted to do something I don't normally do, which is kind of a react kind of thing. I've watched a little bit of this. I follow this guy's his name's Tittle, and I follow him, and I like him, and he has some comments that he's going to be talking about the one button rotation. I think it's kind of a hot topic right now in the World of Warcraft community. I think it's really important uh, discussion to be having about the game right now, and so I just want to chime in my little two talks here and make sure I get the screen set up correctly. There we go. Other than that, there we go. Okay. Um, and I'm not like I will be probably disagreeing with this guy on several different things and nitpicking, but this is not out of malice. It's not out of spite. I am not criticizing this guy's skill or his integrity or anything like that. This is all meant in the spirit of good faith discussion. So with that out of the way, let's get into this.
All right, this is the last video that I'm making talking about the one button rotation. This is going to be basically my condensed thoughts as to why I believe the one button rotation is actively pretty bad for the game. I've had a couple of streams where I've explained my thoughts to people. I even made it to the front page of the WoW Reddit with the YouTube video that I made recently, and I gave some thoughts there.
I actually commented on that video saying that this is going to make all the sweaty people really upset, especially because he like ends the video and he's like, I don't understand. I don't understand. It's very clear. This is a very high end player. And I think probably so far high end that he can't even understand um, the difficulties that the game has accrued over the years. So anyway, let's continue.
This is going to be just basically my condensed thoughts on why I think the one button rotation in its current iteration, in its current state, is bad for the game. And I know that your gut reaction is maybe just to argue, but I just want you guys to take like 5 minutes and just try to listen to my arguments as to why I believe that this is actively bad for the game.
Yes, don't go. I'm going to put the link into the video in here on the video, but don't just go like watch the whole thing. Think about it a little bit before you get to type it on the keyboard.
This is prompted and started by a DM that I got from somebody who works with me at Wowhead, asking if I was going to change this blurb that I wrote about the one button rotation assist feature on Wowhead, and asked basically, am I going to update it? Because one of the things that I wrote about it at the very beginning was the one button assistant is fine and probably will out DPS some heroic level raiders, but it starts to get noticeably worse in Mythic Plus and AoE scenarios. Since then, I did test a little bit on the PTR, and since then, this has largely held true.
Yeah, that's been my experience so far. I've done some testing with it with a couple of different specs. I played a main rogue, and my I could do like the target dummy at like 1.6 million sustained, and then with the one button assistant and a few talent changes to account for how the one button assistant behaves. Basically, it doesn't use the second charge of Shiv, so you might as well talent out of that and into something that's more passive. And same thing, it doesn't use Thistle T, which you can rely on that to proc at like below 40 energy, but you could just talent out of that and get there's a flat buff that you can easily get from swapping out that talent point. You swap out that and it gets like it's like within 100k of like my super sweaty gameplay. But I play rogue specifically because I don't need to look down at the bar, and the big value to me from one button assistant is not having to look at my bar. And so much of of how most specs, I played more specs than I ever have in game. I played Druid, I played Paladin, all three specs. I played Druid, all three specs except Feral. I played Blood DK. I played Resto Shaman and Elemental Shaman. I played a lot of specs just this season, and a lot of them require you to be staring at your bars like every couple of seconds. Like I don't mind glancing down my bar like every 30 seconds or so. I think that's fine. but a lot of them, like Mistweaver Monk, like they have like 4 different 30-second CDs, and you can't line them all up. They're constantly coming off cooldown. You're constantly having to look down. It's a nightmare to play, and it's frankly just unfun. And I think a big part of the one button system is being able to stop staring at your bars and actually, look at the gameplay and see what's going on. So, like I've also played it like I actually in Raid. I didn't just do target dummies. I was playing on my Resto Shaman, and our raid sides got too small, and we didn't need a healer, so I swapped over to Elemental. Don't really know how to play Elemental. I mean, I know like um whatever you call it, mentally or intellectually how to play, but like I don't have the muscle memory or nothing like that. So I did the one button rotation, and I was like fourth in DPS in the raid, and I wasn't anywhere near fourth in gear. Let's put it that way. So it's really good. Um, so anyway, yeah, that's all I want to say with that.
The problem is that there are wide skill disparities in World of Warcraft, and the amount of people that it ends up out DPSing is fairly high, right? Like you guys saw me top DPS in that 17, where I was crushing that DK and crushing that mage in that 17.
That's a good video to watch. It's a lot of fun to watch that one by I can't see the name of the thing, but it's one. But you go to you search Google titles and one button, and you'll see that video. It's a good video.
I then proceeded to do like 18s and top DPS in those 18s. I mean, you can see in this VOD right here, I have it paused at Candle King. I am basically tied with the Death Knight and an 18 Dark Flame Cleft, and we're both doing 6 million DPS overall. And I'm literally just pressing one singular button here. You can literally see I swapped to hand cam, and you can see that I'm basically just holding one button. And now I want to kind of explain why I believe that this is too good and actively harmful for the game. So the first reason that I believe it's just too good is numerically, I think it just does way too much DPS. And when I say numerically it just does too much DPS, you might think, oh, why does this matter? You could just get good. Even in your own video, you said that you could be doing probably somewhere in the order of around 10% more DPS if you were actively playing yourself. Most of the content in this game can be cleared while doing roughly, let's say, 60% of your character's maximum capacity, where this one button rotation, for most players, it's going to be doing around 85% of your character's maximum capacity, which allows you to be able to do most content. And I think that, and I believe this to genuinely be true, if you wanted to get 3 people who were DPS who were using the one button rotation in its current iteration, you could get the rank 1 Mythic Plus title.
I think a lot of people think he's being hyperbolic. I truly believe the 60% is almost certainly true, because you're almost always carrying some lower DPS players. So if everybody is like legitimately performing at least 60% capacity as far as like raw throughput, you can probably clear at least up to like heroic raid, AOTC, and definitely like Keymaster. You can definitely do that. I don't know about hierarchy stuff. I haven't really I haven't gone up to like 3,000 rating and stuff. I usually stop at Keymaster
with it currently. I think that a lot of people will say you should just get good then. And what I will say as a counter argument to that is, first and foremost, players vastly overestimate their own individual skill in World of Warcraft. And there's a lot of people who just genuinely don't care to get better. And by removing the concept of like doing your rotation, that removes a large portion of the gameplay of the game just out of the game. It feels genuinely like you're playing with like hacks on in Grand Theft Auto. And I've seen sometimes where people are like, this is a good learning tool. I would...
Yeah, he talks about how, you should just get good and stuff like that. And a lot of people overestimate that skill. That is absolutely true. A lot of people think that they are a lot more skilled. And then there are a lot of players, especially in more casual guilds. Like if you're not in a guild that, you'll never see this if you're in a guild that sits people regularly for low performance. Like if you're like in a heroic raiding guild, and and it's not like a friends and family like heroic raiding guild, like if they're like really wanting to push content really quickly, and they're like sitting people aggressive, like you're bottom of the charts for 3 pulls in a row, they kick you or whatever. If you're in that guild, this experience will never, this will seem foreign to you because you don't see these players. These players are most of the players in the game, especially even players who are in heroic. Most of the players who are, because I am in a casual kind of friends and family guild, and we pug probably half of our raid, and they perform about as bad as a lot of our players, and our players are not particularly good either. So it's a lot worse than, if you are insulated into that bubble, maybe that you don't that is not part of your experience. But definitely I think especially the lower half of your average casual pickup raid will perform better if they use the one button. A lot of players, they just don't spend their resources. They'll sit on 100 rage half the fight. They'll sit on 100 full runic power, for 80% of the fight. They won't press, I don't know, Iron Fur. They won't, they'll, maybe they'll use their DPS cooldown maybe once or twice or something like that. They won't remember to do it on cooldown. They can't handle doing mechanic and doing somewhat decent. Like any time that there's a mechanic, it's going to kill my DPS. I'm like, and it truly does. It's like they'll go down to like 200k, whereas, if you allow them to like be completely focused, they can do okay. But as soon as you try to get them to do a mechanic, their DPS just goes down into the floor. And that's most players. Most players, they can't see all of the shit that's on the fucking screen. Was it Styx Junk Bunker, the one with all the garbage and everything? They can't see the little bombshell crabs. They can't see it without a weaker that puts a huge freaking blinking arrow on top of it, because it's red on red, and their eyesight's not that good. They don't hear call outs because they're getting older and their hearing's not that good, or they've got law and order going on in the background and they miss the call out or whatever. It's a million reasons why people don't, they just want to show up and they just want to hang out and they want to raid. And for that is, you start in normal and you progress with all the gear inflation and the buffs and everything. You progress all the way up to AOTC. That's way a lot of friends and family, at least from my experience, a lot of pug friendly and friends and family guilds play is that way. Start in normal and they'll progress all the way up to AOTC if they can get there. And like, we're on Mugsy. We haven't got AOTC. We're like, what was it? Like 14 weeks, 16 weeks? I can't remember. We're way into this tier. We should have been done like 2 months ago, but we're still going. We're on Mugsy right now. And it's, that's just how it is. And I think it's a completely different experience from people like Mr. Tettles here. But anyway, we'll go ahead and continue.
Vehemently disagree with these kind of things, and this claims that it allows you to learn your rotation easier. More often than not, I actually don't know what button my character is trying to press. I have a tracker, an action tracker that's at the top right hand corner of my screen. To be able to tell exactly what button the one button rotation is trying to press, I have to actually be looking at it in the top right hand corner of my screen, because I can't really tell what it's trying to press at any given point, which is just counter to what this is supposed to be for, right? It's supposed to be an accessibility.
Yeah. It's like, it's not a teaching aid. The one button thing is definitely not a teaching aid, because the core problem with the reason why people have trouble doing their rotation in combat or whatever is not because they don't know what button to press. It's because they have to look down at their bar. And the way the game is nowadays, you look down from your bar down to your bar for 2 seconds to see what's off cooldown so that you can press the button. You know the buttons. You've got the buttons bound. You're a pretty good player in that regard. You're not clicking. Well, we still have clickers in our guild, but assuming you're a good player and you have everything bound, you still have to look down to see if you could press the button. And you look down and then you look back up, and oh my God, there was a swirly that dropped. Like as soon as you looked away, it dropped, and now you start running away, but it's already too late. Boom, you get hit by the swirly, you're dead. It's it's the staring at the bar. The way classes are designed, they're designed to make you stare at the freaking bar nonstop. They like you play Guardian Druid, and like it seems like every freaking button has a little tiny like 8-second CD, 6-second CD, 12-second CD. Mistweaver Monk has like 5 freaking 30-second CD plus like a 6-second CD on one of the kicks and an 8-second CD that resets sometimes when you do the other button. Blackout kick versus it's CDs everywhere, and you have to stare at your bars or move the bar to the center of the screen, which brings me to my next problem. The problem that that World of Warcraft has right now, if I was to sum it all up, that the one button rotation is a band-aid, and the band-aid it's a band-aid for a problem that is on the screen right now. You can see it. It is staring us in the face. What the hell is all of this shit on this? It got all of this stuff to track all of the cooldowns on for everything. You can see here. First of all, he's playing meta comp minus a resto shaman. I suppose that's a nice sub, but anyway, he needs to know if ascendance is available, and what is it? Silencing sigil is available. Does the shadow meld? Can the DH shadow meld? What about, does he have AMZ? He's got all of this information. Now he's a really skilled player and he can parse all this information. He has capacity to parse all this information. So whenever you give him the one button rotation, he's fucking bored. He's bored because he's used to being hyper stimulated and being baby fed all of this information by add-ons. You take this add-on, all of these add-ons away from here, and he's no longer as skilled as not that he's not skilled, but he's no longer as skilled. He can no longer perform at the same level that he does now. If you took all of this stuff away, he's still high performer, but in a different regime, right? And just look at, so that's just the UI issue, but just look at his bars. He's got 3 full bars. Like I said, I played like 6 different classes and, numerous specs more than that, just this season. And every one of them is pushing like 30 buttons. You get Druid right here that he's playing right here. That's pushing 40 buttons. My Shaman, like just last night, I just happened to have another shaman that was higher eye level, and obviously that was his main or whatever, and he was just kicking my butt and healing, and he was giving me some tips and stuff, and he was like, you got to talent into this, and I'm like, I don't have the freaking buttons. And the thing is, like, I use this thing and this thing to freaking play. I have the most ergonomic setup that is possible, and even I struggle with, like, you get over like 30 keybinds. I'm like, why can't you play this game with like a dozen primary abilities and maybe another dozen like ancillary abilities that are like occasional use kind of stuff? Why can't we get down to that? That would be a much more manageable situation. Anyway, my point being, like, this is also another example of stuff that's on the screen that demonstrates the problem. Is there's playing too many abilities. Like, and he's really skilled, so he's going to be bored when you start taking away his toys. Now, most players probably won't be bored. That's what I'm trying to get at here. Is I don't think he really represents anything like an average player, and I don't think we should be catering to that playstyle. This game is more complicated to control than StarCraft 2. StarCraft 2, you don't have to go through and rebind your keyboard. This game is no longer made for a regular keyboard and mouse. Standard keyboard and mouse, it is not made for that. I'm like, you don't go an hour before you're trying to, like, with the default keybinds, trying to like hit 9 on your keyboard while you're moving with WASD. It's nobody does that control scheme, but that's the default control scheme because I guess for legacy reasons, we've never changed it. Why isn't the default control scheme like layered around Q and E and R and F and V and Z and X and C? Those should be the default keybinds. nowadays. In modern WoW, we know that that's how you should bind it. Otherwise, you're teaching the character to move their hand off of WASD to click click the equal sign to get their 12th ability, or to click a button, or to, to be a clicker. So you quickly, beyond like the first hour, you're already have more buttons than can be easily controlled with the control scheme that they have by default. And I think they should rework the control scheme to reflect that. I think there should be like a standard layout for every spec. Like Q is going to be this button. You could rebind it if you want, but Q is going to be this button if you don't change it. Or, F is going to be this, this ability if you don't rebind it. Like if you go play Marvel Rivals, there's like 30 something specs in World of Warcraft. There's like 30 something heroes in there, and you can jump into a game and you can click on a hero that you never played in Marvel Rivals. You press F1, it brings up this screen that gives you a quick digest of the like half dozen abilities that hero can do. Has like a little video showing like showing it like in action and stuff while you're doing it, and you can read the whole thing and understand the basics of that class enough to go play the match in that 30 seconds of that pre-game lobby, and you're ready to go. And at any time during the game, you could just press F1 again and pop that screen up and remind yourself. I think that's the ideal. I think that if there was a goalpost that I could, the shining city on the hill that I could put as a goalpost for the developers, if there was one thing, it would be is that you could get the control scheme, you could get the spec summaries all in just like one little tight screen that shows you the controls and all your abilities and how you shouldn't have to go to Wowhead for an hour. And I've done it many times. Like I said, just this season, you go to Wowhead, you go copy the talents, then you go read the rotation guide. You parse that for like, the next 15. I'm like, what is it? Because you have to highlight over the little tooltip. So like, what is that ability? Oh, then I got to cast this a bit. Oh, what is that ability? And you read that tooltip. It takes you forever to go get the basics. And then of course you still don't understand it. So you go watch a video, you go watch like 4 or 5 freaking videos, trying to find the one video that breaks it down Barney style, instead of teaching you, here's your talent set. They always start with your freaking talent setup. No, just tell me what buttons to press. But anyway, they should make the game like legitimately playable on a controller, like legitimately playable on a controller. And I don't mean like Microsoft bought WoW, so now it's going to be on consoles. I don't care. I think it would be good for the game. It's a design constraint that would force them to say, is this button really worth having? Is this button really worth the real estate for the class? Is it really delivering value, right? Like if I go play my protection paladin and there are a bunch of rotational cooldowns that you have as prop paladins. You have like the little spinny hammers thing or whatever that you have that is your main attack, and then you have judgment, and then you have divine hammer or whatever that's your execute. You have all these buttons that are generators, but they have so many charges and the cooldowns are so short and you have so many of them that you practically always have one of them up. Why not just have one button with no freaking cooldown? And now you've removed buttons and you made things simpler. And now if I want to generate, I know exactly what button to press. I press this one to generate holy power. I press it again to generate another one. Oh, by the way, if I want to generate one holy power, guess what I do? I press that one button. It's very easy. You don't have to roll your fingers across the keyboard in priority order to try and find which one's off cooldown without looking at your bars. Again, without looking at your bars. So like they've added all these charges to work around having all these cooldowns when they could have just not had a cooldown to begin with, and it would play functionally the same. It would play like my road. That's why I like playing prop paladins. I don't have to look down at my bars. It's a recurring theme here. Anyway, let's get back to it.
feature to help players actively play the game. But what it is gone and done is instead of
let
being
me get him back in
which
context.
is just counter to what this is supposed to be for, right? It's supposed to be an accessibility feature to help players actively play the game. But what it is gone and done is instead of being an accessibility feature, it has removed gameplay from a large portion of the player base, which I think that there's a very large distinction between accessibility and gameplay being removed here. And that's one of the core tenets of this argument here, is that removing gameplay is not adding accessibility. I think that the highlighted rotation assist thing that like lights up the actions on your bar and you play light up whack-a-mole and you try to learn your rotation that way, that is an accessibility feature to try to teach people how to play the game.
He is right. It is definitely removing gameplay. It's absolutely removing gameplay. I would say it's non-essential gameplay. It was a bunch of noise in the gameplay that can be removed and you could still have a good experience. But like, you know, some players are obviously going to be more bored if they can handle more, right? But they can push higher keys and keep themselves interested. That's all I'm going to say. But, you know, he keeps saying this was supposed to be an accessibility feature. It's not an accessibility. Let's be real here. Let's be absolutely real here. The reason why they said it was an accessibility feature was it was to preempt any criticism about adding the thing to the game. The developers in a rock in their hard place. I am absolutely certain that the developers know that their game is too complex. I am absolutely certain that they have gotten that message. I know that there's a problem, but they also have a problem that there are going to be a lot of players that are going to be offended and ostracized or whatever. They're going to be put off by any attempt to start taking away buttons. There was a lot of vocal backlash to the pruning and everything from really the sweaty players. And I think they're trying to avoid that repeat. So this is a patch. This is a hack to get around the fact that they can't simplify their classes right now. Like they're already taking a bunch of blowback from because they're talking about removing add-ons and everybody's starting to get mad about, but I want my combat add-on so that I can, you know, push. Like the game's going to be just as challenging without add-ons. It's just a different challenge, right? But there's pushback against that, and there would be a similar pushback against the single ability rotation or whatever the hell it's called, the single ability button. If they didn't put the armor of accessibility in front of it so that nobody could criticize it. But to me, it was like, absolutely, this is the Band-Aid fix for overly complex specs, and most specs are overly complex.
And I believe that the one button assist, it can also be an assistant for people who are, you know, let's say paraplegic, or they're missing hands, they're missing digits, that kind of thing. And I think that I'm not going to speak for them as to how this is going to positively affect them, but I think that this is too widely encompassing with the players that it actually does give a benefit for. Whenever you think about it like this: would you park in a handicapped parking spot? No. You're not going to park in a handicapped parking spot unless you need the handicapped parking spot. So this isn't something that's made to be used by all players. It's not supposed to be used by all players, but as it currently stands, it's so good damage-wise that there's a large portion of people that are willing, or that should be looking to use it. And I know that immediately there's some people who are going to type in the comment section, I would never need to use this, or I don't want to use this. And I
would absolutely use it. Like I recommend like I was just last night I was recommending, like, dude, use it. Like like I'm on my Bear Druid, I'm doing single button rotation just so I don't have to stare at those stupid freaking tiny little cooldowns so to know which button I can press. I'd macro that with Iron Fur and just have a blast, you know. You know, I could still, you know, stun things. I got time. I got pay more. I can actually look at my character, see what they're standing. I could see the mechanics and stuff like that. When I was on that Mungsy fight on the Elemental, I was actually able to see the fight for once, like the whole fight, because I was ranged for once. Normally I play melee, and being able to, you know, just look at the fight and, you know, the movement's challenging enough, you know, and dealing with the bombs and the soaks and move over here and then move over here. There's a lot going on in that fight. It's a super fun fight if you're not struggling to try and perform a perfect rotation at the same freaking time. It's especially if you have to stare at your bars. So anyway, here we go.
Have a question. What happens whenever you get out DPS by somebody who's using it? First and foremost, how is it going to make you feel? And secondly, are you going to be then encouraged to use the one button rotation? And thirdly, do we think that that's healthy for the game? So first and foremost, I think if you get out DPS by the one button rotation, you're going to question basically everything that you've done in World of Warcraft. And there's a lot of people who are going to get out DPS by this. For parse,
there's going to be a lot of people. It's not going to affect the parses. He's probably going to start breaking up parses, but the parses are going to change over time as more people use the one button rotation. It's going to increase parses. The average of the parses is going to go up. So it's going to be easier to tell when you're doing bad because the bar is, you know, the minimum bar is being set by the one. Keep in mind the people who one button rotation is most valuable for is the people who struggle the most at doing the rotation and doing mechanics, like, and spending their resources and generating their resources. They're bad at doing that, and this is going to help them have the headspace to do that.
Wise, around the 35 to 60% parse range is what I'm seeing from mythic level kills, which are max level geared players doing the hardest level of content. You're able to get between a 35 and a 60 percentile parse. Bananas. And on heroic, you're able to get somewhere between a 70 and an 80th percentile parse. So 80% of people who are killing heroic bosses, you're able to out DPS if you're using your cooldowns at the right time and the one button rotation. And that to me is just way too high. So now there's obvious.
I don't agree. I don't think the button has a purpose if it is uselessly nerfed. If it is so bad that it's basically useless, then why even have it in the game? They added this feature and it's not bringing the bar up to an acceptable level of gameplay, then there's no point in having it in the game.
Obviously some counter arguments here. First and foremost, I've seen this one it was very common. It's talking about the rotational complexity. Whenever I looked at this Reddit post, people were like, I think this is a symptom of Boomkin more than is one button. Here's the reason that I don't think this is true, is because, most of the specializations in the game are very, similar in terms of their damage gain. And Moonkin is actually not the best at the one button rotation. I mean, we looked at the DPS penalty, Aug Evoker, Destro Warlock. There's a lot of specializations that are.
I just want to make a quick note there. I obviously I didn't do the testing here, but I'm pretty sure that they were using the same talent layouts because that's obviously the first pass thing that you do. But again, like I mentioned earlier, you can optimize for the one button rotation that should close the gap. So if there's our abilities that the run button rotation isn't using or is using poorly, you can talent out of those options and pick an option that will use well or be utilized better by the one button rotation. So you can spec for the one button rotation.
Better at utilizing the one button rotation and taking advantage of the gains that are attached to it compared to where Balance Druid is. It's not even the best. And a symptom of Moonkin, I don't think this is necessarily true at all. The one button rotation is kind of your mileage may vary for specializations type of situation where not all specializations are made equal. But at the same time, it's not a symptom of Moonkin. It's a symptom of just how complicated specializations can be at times and just how good it is to make sure you're filling a global.
I'll let him finish.
Every single time. Something that's eliminated whenever you're doing this is something I like to refer to as brain lag. If you've ever
Okay, I just wanted to pause it. Let me see. make sure I got his point correctly here.
Just how complicated specializations can be at times, and just how good it is to make sure you're filling a global every single time. Something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like some people just struggle filling globals, right? They struggle even like to get like, you know, the zeroth law of DPS is always be attacking or always be casting, right? And they struggle with that. But most specs are very complex, and it becomes abundantly clear if you go back to Classic and look at those specs. Now, I'm not saying that we need to go back to there. I want to be very clear. We don't need to go back to there. But there were examples in Classic that were pretty close to that were pretty close to where we should probably land, pretty closely, which is most classes were largely copied and pasted mechanically from EverQuest. So you had your spellcasters, they had cast times on their abilities, so it took them time to cast. That was the resource, was cast time and mana. If they didn't have that, they had a cooldown. Even if it was only the global cooldown to present, you know, that's for, you know, not spamming the server too much. That's why global cooldown exists. But and then if you were like melee or something like that, and you had instant cast abilities like Paladin and Judgment or whatever, you had cooldowns, short little 6 seconds, 9-second cooldowns in the, you know, for your, you know, your like dozen abilities that you had back in Classic, right? And those were really lame classes, but there were two exceptions. Those two exceptions were the two innovations that happened in Classic over previous MNOs, and that was Warrior Rage and Rogue Energy combo point system. You know, suddenly you had a class where you built up Rage and you spent Rage, and that was the gameplay loop, and it was limited. You had Rage generation was limited by like damage intake, and from your abilities, there were cooldowns on your abilities, so that was another resource, was the cooldowns on your abilities. But rogues were like the more advanced option of that. That was the advanced a resource system that they added as an experiment, and that was there were no rotational cooldowns. You were purely limited by this resource called energy that recharged over time, and you could press any button that would use energy, and it didn't have any cooldown. You could always press a button so long as you had energy to press that button. And so you didn't have to stare at your bars, like even as far as like back in Classic. And you know, you were converting that into combo points, and then combo points, again, you could spend those without any cooldowns because you built them up, and you could spend them, and you had like trade-offs of whether you're going to spend it on slice and dice, you're going to spend it on rupture, or I don't know, expose armor, or whatever, your kidney shot, whatever you're going to spend it on. You can make like this interesting choice. So they had like this tiered thing, and that's why I always loved Road, was you didn't have rotational cooldowns. You didn't have to stare at your bars. You just had to glance down every now and then to, you know, check that evasion is off cooldown, or Cloak of Shadows or something like that. Vanished, it did come off cooldown, but you weren't staring like at your bars like constantly, like I do like on Guardian Druid or Windwalker Monk or something, Mistweaver. But that was the key innovation, and so it's purely driven by, the whole point was like that was all driven by class design, and we could had that simple or class design instant, because now every spec now has resource systems. They all have their different ones. Different specs often have different resources, but they all have resources now for the most part. So why don't we just lean into those resource systems instead of, you know, having so many things? I think as a goal, developers should have it so that as a goal, class design wise, you don't have to look down at your bar, but like every 30 seconds or so. If they're going to add an ability to the class, they need to look at the attention budget, so to speak, and is this going to make me have to stare at the bar, or have to put the bar in the center of the screen just so I can keep track of everything? Like this guy, he has all this cooldowns in the center of his screen just so that he can still see his character, right? Anyway, let's continue.
I think that's eliminated whenever you're doing this is something I like to refer to as brain lag. If you've ever played a new specialization, you'll notice this very frequently that you spend a lot of time. I would describe it as thinking. You're not actively pressing a button. You don't have something queued up next because you're sitting there like, oh, what am I supposed to press next? Oh, what am I supposed to press next? And you get like analysis by paralysis, where you're trying to think way too long and hard about what you're supposed to be pressing next, when in reality, the best thing that you could be doing is pressing anything, even if it is necessarily the wrong button. And so I do actually think that both things are simultaneously true. I think this is too strong, and I think rotations are a little bit too complex. But I don't think that rotations are too complex because you have too many buttons. I think that we have a similar amount of buttons that we had in Warlords of Draenor and Mist of Pandaria, yet rotations are more complex than they were back then. And
They are way more complex, and it's because there are more interactions than ever. Don't make me bring up the freaking talent tree for Resto Shaman and then type in Riptide into the search thing and see how many hits you get for the interactions with just Riptide alone for Resto Shaman. There are way too many interactions. That's complexity. And more buttons is more complexity at a base level. You add more buttons, that's more interactions that are possible. But it isn't solely, he is kind of sort of correct. It isn't driven solely by the number of buttons, but just physically. Most people physically can't handle like 30 keybinds like all at once. Like, but you've got like maybe 24, like with modifiers, because you can't press all. Remember, you got to be able to move WASD with all of these combinations, and you can't move WASD with all of the button modifier combos. You just can't do it, and so it's like the game is not designed for the reality, the physical reality. I'm sure like really great players, like great StarCraft 2 players, they're freaking amazing, but they're freaks of nature, right? Pro StarCraft 2 players, like, I don't want to be a pro StarCraft 2 player, just try to play WoW. And that's kind of how I feel.
And the reason is because of how the talent system has changed. If you go and look at any talents, I'm just going to swap to balance because of the specialization that I know the best. If you look at all of these talents, you have just so many damage procs and random bloat that you have to factor in, and your rotation and your buttons change drastically depending on which passive proc talents that you have available to you.
And you don't even know what's procking. So you'll get like a button will light up on your bar, and you're like, I have no idea why it's light, because there's 20 different reasons why it might light up. You have no idea what you did to make it light up, and obviously you will learn eventually. But even on my Brewmaster Monk, there's like this like little green wreath or something that procs around my Brewmaster Monk occasionally. I have no idea what that is. Zero clue what that is. It doesn't even light up a button. So I have no idea what that is. I look at the buff bar. There's 30 fucking buffs up there. So good luck with that. I mean, just look right here. This is small group content, and he's got three freaking rows of buffs. I mean, it's a bit much, right?
And for a lot of the classes and a lot of rotations, they have gotten more complicated over time. But the solution to that isn't, oh, give players or remove gameplay by allowing you to play with one button rotation. There's another,
the real solution is to prune abilities, but Blizzard is trying to walk the tightrope to give the immediate. They're trying to give the immediate. I'm guessing. Obviously, I'm completely freaking guessing, right? Like, I can't read the minds of the developers, but if I was to hazard to guess, they are trying to walk the tightrope of, let's go ahead and get something that makes the game manageable for the bulk of the players, and then we will slowly start pruning out some of this complexity over time until we arrive at something that's more manageable. And then truly at that point, then the game, should be reasonably playable by mere mortals. And then, the single button, single ability button will truly be an accessibility button at that point. But we're nowhere near that right now. We aren't even close. Like, I'm going to do our alt raid on Saturday. I'm going to end up playing my Windwalker Monk again. You better believe me, I'm playing the fucking single button. It's insane. It really is.
Accessibility argument here. I actually think that this is pretty good for accessibility, but one thing that I will say, having used this more than most people, this shit hurts my hands. Like, I don't struggle with carpal tunnel. My wrists are normally in pretty good shape. After having done one singular dungeon, spamming one button over and over and over again, my hands were genuinely on fire.
Yeah. I'd see this a lot with people who are ability spammers, where they spam buttons and everything. Yeah, if you try to do that with a one button thing, you're gonna go nuts. I did put a key repeat on. I did some delves with my Guardian Druid just to kind of play around with the single button ability with Iron. I macroed it with Iron Fur just for maximum Unga Bunga Mongo, gameplay. And it was super fun because I'll press it once, it would turn it on and like repeat like every quarter second. And I was just chilling. It was super chill. It was great. But yeah, if you especially if you're like a melee and you're casting like every second, Moonkin's not that bad. Listen, what you press it in like every second and a half, second and a quarter, you're pressing again, queuing. But I know a lot of people that they spam that button, and you don't have to. There's spell queue for a reason, guys. You don't have to spam the key. You could just get the rhythm. Cast. You don't have to spam. But anyway.
And now your argument could be, Lamau, he's not a spammer, bind it to multiple binds.
He's not spamming.
But the issue whenever you're binding it to multiple binds isn't that kind of ironic that you're utilizing the one button rotation, yet you need multiple binds for that? Like, then we're removing the accessibility function out of it just by needing the having the requirement that we need it on multiple binds, and it genuinely hurts. Now,
just bind it to scroll wheel. Scroll it up and down. Bind it to scroll up and down, and you just scroll up and down in a fight. You'll be fine.
For accessibility purposes, I think that this can still be actually fairly good for the people that it is desired for. And again, it's going back to that handicap spot argument, where there's going to be a lot of people who are going to get drastic benefits out of using this that shouldn't be using it just because of how much damage it's allowing your players to actually have. And so just put yourself in this position. You're a new player. You're starting to play a new specialization. Could you, on one hand, spend an entire month trying to learn a specialization and get decent at the specialization and get out DPS by the tank for the first 15 dungeons that you're doing on the spec and be bad at it for a while and constantly improve? Or you could turn on the one button rotation, get 85% of your gameplay, and be able to out DPS pretty much everybody all the way up until like a 12 or maybe even potentially a higher level key. Like you're seeing me here and this 18 coming for this DK. Is that, that's kind of gonna put you in a situation. And I started an Ellie Shaman recently. I got beat by tanks in the first like 15 out of 20 dungeons that I ran. I lost to.
Dude, Elemental Shaman feels so freaking bad, especially like out in the open world. Like I've had discussions on Reddit, and by discussions I mean arguments about how bad it is. I'm like, it's not bad. You just gotta press your cooldown. I'm like, yeah, if you don't have a freaking cooldown, you have to press a cooldown for every single mob that you want to freaking kill. It is ridiculous. Otherwise, if you're standing there for 2 seconds while the mob is hitting you, and you're bloop. Bloop. It's so freaking bad. It feels terrible.
Tanks, and I promise if I turned on the one button rotation for the entire first month I was learning that Ellie Shaman, I would have been out DPS by the tank. I don't claim to be the best player ever. I'm not the best multi-classer ever, but at the same time, I'm somebody who has an abundance of time, right? I'm a professional content creator. Yeah. And so should it be this situation where I would have benefited purely to just turn on the one button rotation and not actively interact with the game? I think the answer is most certainly no.
Yeah, you would have benefited. You would have been having fun, like playing around with the other shaman abilities and looking at the dungeon and socializing and doing other things than pressing a certain key sequence over and over and over in the middle of a fight and staring at your bars. To be clear, setting up a bunch of freaking weak auras to put all this shit on your fucking screen. We forgot that step.
I think that this is doubly true for players, let's say, who have played the game for 10 years and they see themselves getting out DPS by the one button rotation. I know you think it can't be you, but I promise there are a lot of people who think it can't be them who would actually get out DPS by the one button rotation.
Oh yeah, it's super close. Like I said, I'm doing like 1.6, and I'm pretty sure I could. I did 1.4. I'm pretty sure I could get up to like 1.5 million DPS. It's absolutely, it's close, and definitely there'll be less variance as well. So there'll be times where I definitely perform worse just because of variance in skill. I get distracted. I'll be less likely to be distracted with the single button rotation or whatever. But you know what? I also wouldn't get distracted as much if the rotations were just simpler to begin with. Like, do I really need Deathstalker's Mark to like the track? Oh, we got 3 stacks to consume. I get Darkest Night, and then I got to use a full combo point finisher to put it back up. And then I don't need all of that stuff. I really don't. Just let me build and spend combo points. Throw up a rupture. Throw some Envenoms. I'm good. I don't need all this. I don't need freaking King's Bane and pressing Shiv and all that. I don't need all of this extra stuff. Mista Pandaria Assassination Rogue was peak, which is really timely because that's when they simplify the talents like into the tiers, right? And then it was perfect, right? Like we learned our lesson. Like these big huge talent trees, they're untenable, they're going to grow out of control, and it really comes down to only a few meaningful choices anyway, and there is a right answer and a wrong answer, so we might as well just distill it down to these few meaningful choices and let you just choose between those. That was perfect, spot on reasoning, and an absolutely perfect design. And I take a break for the first time in Dragonflight, and I missed most of Dragonflight, and I come back in the end of Dragonflight, and I open up my talent, I press in, and open up my talent pane, and I have a fucking heart attack. Because the talent tree's back, and I'm like, I don't want to deal with this shit anymore. Like, I got burnt out on fucking theory crafting and all of that stuff. Because I used to do, like, if you remember, like Shadowcraft, I used to literally write Shadowcraft, like write the code for it. I wrote the website and the back end. I used to literally go every PTR. You go create a new character, go buy some freaking white daggers from Stormwind, and then go on the dummy and test out the new spell to make sure that they fix this bug. Did they fix this talent? Is the tooltip updated? Is it reflected in the actual damage? Does this new ability, does it work the way that the developers say that it worked? Half the time it didn't. I was the guy that helped figure out that, Mangosh used normalized offhand weapon damage, but, poison procs were poison procs per minute, but, they weren't normalized for weapon speed. So you wanted the fast offhand dagger. You figure out all that. I was very deep into the fucking weeds. I was an expert, and I come back in fucking Dragonflight, and I'm a goddamn noob. I don't know anything about my fucking class that I've been playing for 20 freaking years. Anyway, I don't even know how we got there, but it's yeah. Let's move on. I'm sorry, I went on a tangent.
DPS 3700 IO DPS with the one button rotation. So like just let that sink in. I out DPS some 3700 IO players with it. And if you got out DPS with it, is that not going to give you just like pause and make you reconsider everything? Or worst case scenario, push you towards actually utilizing the one button rotation as opposed to utilizing the gameplay that Blizzard has created by playing your rotation. I think that some of the most fun that I actually have in the game is playing my rotation. There's a reason that people get so mad whenever their class is buggy. It's because that's the vehicle in which they interact with the game.
Rotations have to be fun. Don't get me wrong. I think it was Ian, or maybe it was Ghostcrawler before him, in a dev interview, even said this himself, or something to this effect. With like rotations have to be engaging enough, right? They have to be. They don't have to be super compelling. At least back when they said that, they said they don't have to be super compelling. They just have to be moderately interesting, and in combination with the encounter with collaborating with your teammates and doing your rotation, your own personal rotation, all of that combines to create the difficulty. So having a super compelling rotation on a target dummy shouldn't be the goal. At least to me, shouldn't be the goal. And it seems like they've just went hog wild with trying to make these super compelling rotations with buttons lighting up everywhere and procs and everything going off. Like, I have no idea what my tier set does. I know it says winning streak. I have no fucking clue what it does. No clue. I don't care. I don't. This is a former theory crafter. I don't give a shit. I really don't. I didn't even know how to do Deathmark until the other day. I was like, all right, I should probably finally figure out how Deathmark actually works. Anyway, I'm like, it's too much. It's too much. I want to play more classes. I want to play more specs. I want to play more interesting encounters. I don't want more interesting rotations. I physically can't play more interesting rotations. I'm at my limit. Please, someone help me.
And now, Blizzard, by utilizing this one button rotation, you have taken the vehicle in which most players interact with the game and you have removed it, or at least removed most of it. Now, then it creates this kind of situation where players, people kept discrediting the one button rotation video, saying that it wasn't just one button, that I was pressing my cooldowns and utility buttons. And let me just say, this is the dumbest argument I've ever heard, because it is so much easier to teach people how to utilize their cooldowns and their utility than it is to tell them how to perfectly do their rotation, right? Or at least do their rotation to 85% of the maximum capacity. There's so much.
Yeah, he's absolutely right. It's not a whole lot compelling, but honestly, except for like really ridiculously skilled players, the encounters themselves are usually more than engaging enough. Like, freaking, there's so much going on with sticks and Ricky reverb, and what is it, what was the first fight, Vexy or whatever, with the carts and everything. There's lots of little. We can have more fun encounters instead of having more fun and varied and interesting encounters if we're not so hyper focused on this hyper stimulating rotation. And not only that, that also lowers the jump that you have to do as like a new player. You come in, you do the little island or whatever the hell it is, and you got a couple of dozen abilities, and you quest all the way through everything, and you get all your abilities, and you have things kind of set. And you're doing questing, and then you start jumping into like dungeons, and people are just flying. Like, you have this giga tank that's just like flying through the dungeon, and so you learn nothing, and because everything is just dead. It's like time walking and normal dungeons are just like speed runs. and then you get into hooks, same thing, and then you start doing Mythic Plus, and suddenly you do a Mythic 0, and suddenly everything's killing you. Your damage is absolute trash. You have no idea why. People are screaming and getting mad at you because you're so bad. And like, the game just threw you to the goddamn wolves, because that jump in skill that you need to have to move into in-game content is so freaking high. And it's because, in large part, because of how complex rotations are. They want you to kick shit and stun stuff and CC that, and and we're doing this skip, so you got to jump over this freaking wall and this way, and oh, you can't actually, you gotta wiggle this way, and then you can jump, and then you got to turn as you jump, and then you can get over. You know, it's there's so much that people have to freaking learn, and you know, if you didn't experience it because you've been playing it you've been playing the game for 20 years.
I mean, I had a conversation with somebody right before the one button rotation came out, and they asked if you could get the title with the one button rotation. I thought the answer was no, but having played with it, the answer is unequivocally yes. And I think that being able to get the cutting edge or the rank 1 Mythic Plus title by only using the one button rotation creates this large, I would say, power imbalance, right? Where now there's going to be, you know, people talk about the skill floor in this game being raised and stuff like that. But I think that the game is genuinely fun whenever you're actively doing your rotation. And I know
it is more fun when you're playing your rotation. Don't get me wrong. I am not disagreeing with his point. Ideally, there is reasonably engaging class complexity meshing with reasonably interesting and complex encounters. But we can't have, you know, maximally complex stuff like I think we are at the limit. I really do think we are at the limit of like class complexity and stuff. It really is absurd. I mean, just this VOD that he's been doing has just been demonstrating. You can't even see your character because there's so much shit everywhere. The game is hard. Let's be real here. The game is hard.
Some people don't.
You get past the leveling experience and past, you know, the level up dungeons and stuff like that. And you start getting Mythic Plus, and you start doing especially heroic rating, and you're gonna you have to put in some effort, a lot of effort.
Genuinely, I know that some people don't care.
And by effort, I mean you have to spend time outside a game, watching videos, reading guides and stuff because you're not going to learn this stuff in game. Like it's completely out of game. And I think by simplifying things and making it so you can get a reasonable level of resources like in game. And I don't mean we should have Wowhead guides in game. I mean, it should be simple enough that like your talent tree, you should just be able to read all 16 talents or whatever, or 12 talents or however many talents it is. You just have to read them all and choose which one in each tier. Like, I'm not saying we got to go back to the Mista Pandaria talents or whatever, but something like that. I'm like, there's so much noise currently in the talent trees now. You have to take this node to get to, there's all these mandatory talents that you just have to take. And so you're like, can I drop this talent for this other talent? And you have to go check a guide to see if that's not a terrible mistake, because there's no way for you to know, like, just in game, whether or not this talent is good or not. Most of the time, like, especially if this is a throughput talent, there's no way for you to know. You have to simulate your character, because sometimes the most innocuous thing, because of all of these complex interactions, the most innocuous thing could be this massive DPS increase or this massive nerf. You don't know, so you have to go for the guide and read it and watch a video and talk to other players. And I mean, the talking to other players is that's a great thing. But and I don't hate Wowhead. I recommend everybody go to Wowhead and for all of their class guides every single time. But I think they're really great. I recommend Tettles. I didn't even realize he wrote the guide for the Balanced Druid, but now I know. So it was a good guide, Tettles. Loved it. You taught me Balanced Druid. It was really great. But anyway, let's get back to it.
Just want these random people and their pugs to get better, and they view this as it doesn't matter as long as it doesn't affect exactly me, but it's going to affect everybody. And there's a lot of people who are going to get out DPS by the one button rotation, and I think that is an incredibly problematic prospect. So what would I do to fix this? I would immediately enact a negative 50% aura penalty for using this. I actually think that the GCD penalty thing sucks. I would maybe first consider just
I do kind of. Let me finish let me let him finish.
Removing that if I'm Blizzard, because I actually don't like how the 25% GCD penalty nonsense works. It over punishes energy specializations, and it under punishes specializations that have cast times that are longer than the GCD floor, and increasing the GCD penalty more is just really jank, and it feels super bad whenever it's like slow to press your buttons. Where some specializations get over punished, but some specs get under punished, like anybody who has a dot basically gets under punished, that kind of thing. Or again, cast times that are longer than a 1 GCD. But I think that removing that and then giving players basically a negative 50% aura penalty or a negative 75% aura penalty is probably the best approach.
I disagree with the numbers that he's spouting there, but I do agree with the GCD thing. It shouldn't be a GCD thing. That makes the game feel worse, and we should be doing that. Also, as he mentioned, it interacts with different specs differently. So especially if you're a GCD lock class, you're going to be a lot more penalized than a class that's not GCD lock. It's relatively okay for like Assassination Rogue. It's terrible for Outlaw Rogue, which has a point, like during Adrenaline Rush, you have a 0.8 second GCD. Like you have carpal tunnel. You can get carpal tunnel from that freaking spec. It's so high IPM. So the GCD penalty is just killer. Not to mention it's just terribly programmed anyway. So but like even if it was like perfectly programmed, I think probably a 10% penalty is more than enough of a penalty. Because one, their rotations are not particularly optimized, and they're never going to be particularly well optimized. And two, I did have a point too. I forgot it. Yeah, they're not relatively well optimized, and I forget what the other point I was going to make. God damn it. Oh, well, whatever. GCD penalty. I forgot. It's right there. It's bothering me. Now I can't think of anything else. Okay, but yeah, the flat penalty is probably. Oh yeah, and people obsess over Warcraft log rankings when like there's a discrepancy of like 5%. When one spec is like 5% less than the other spec, everybody loses their fucking mind. When they do like an aura buff, like to Solidity Rogue last patch, of 5%, that's like mega patch, right? That's mega aura buff. So I think if they do a 10% penalty just flat, I think that's fine. It's well outside the normally defined. You can make it 15, if you really want to. I think 10% is fine though. It's big enough to be like noticeable. Like you can see the decimal. You can see one decimal, at least one decimal level of decrease, right? And it's flat. It's fair. Flat damage or increase. I don't know how they would implement it though. It would have to be like a private aura that you can't see that applies the flat buff. Otherwise, I think numbers don't make sense. But anyway, it might mess with logging. I don't know. There could be other knock-on effects. But anyway, I'll move on.
A conversation with Evade a couple days ago, and he was giving me this situation where right before the 1-button rotation came out, he was doing a weekly key with people who had similar-ish gear to him. He said that there was one player in that group that was doing similar damage to the tank. There was two players that were doing he was doing 3x their damage, and he was like, dude, this is actually crazy, because now if those players just removed all of the gameplay elements out of their rotation and they just put on the 1-button rotation and started spamming that, they're going to 4x their DPS, or they're going to 3x their DPS, or they're going to 2x their DPS. And I think that's a really large problem whenever the solution is not actually to get good, but the solution is instead to go ahead and just put on the 1-button rotation and just bat chest. There again, going back to this guide, I think it's kind of concerning that for most people who have reached this point where they want to be more competitive, the correct answer is to tell them, oh, well, actually, you should just put on the 1-button rotation, and you're going to do most of your damage capacity, right? We're gonna be able to do within 15% of maximum DPS. That's like a huge problem. And I know that people look at these numbers and they're like, well, actually, it's you see that's a 15% damage decrease. But what you have to know is that for most people who play this game, they don't play this game like Sims. Like, I don't even play this game like Sims.
Yeah, I never, even on my rogue at the height of my skill, you know, when I could play the best, I've always had the goal of doing 80% of Sim DPS in an actual encounter. And that's about the best. I don't think I've ever like consistently reached that.
There's a sim APL and there's like a practical APL. And the practical APL is how 99% of people play the game. And that's a lot of times actually similar to what the rotation assist has, where it's within, say, 5 to 10% of what the sims are going to show. So you're already paying a 5 or 10% DPS penalty. What's another 5% on top of that to be able to completely automate your rotation?
Yeah, that is part of the kind of inaccuracies of Sims. Not that this is like a big problem. Well, from my experience with the Rogue APL authors, because I used to work with them, at least at the time, we're always trying to do things that were realistic, because you could definitely do things in the sim that were not realistic behavior, that would, you're going to cast Shiv at this like random moment because it's, a random lull in the rotation or something like that. People normally wouldn't do that kind of stuff. Stuff that would be like, a tenth of a percent, a tenth of a percent, that, people aren't really going to do. But yeah, you can get into weird games with simulations. And to be clear, he's talking APL, that's the action priority list. So simulation craft. So if you go to raid bots or some of I guess there's other, like, I think there's, what's the healer one? Okay. Questionably Epic. Go to Questionably Epic, and a lot of these like gear compilation sites that list your like best trinkets or your best talents and stuff like that. A lot of that stuff is run through Simulation Craft. When you say SimC, that's Simulation Craft, which is a program that like simulates your character. And so you have to enter like character information, but you also have to enter what abilities your character is going to do. And simulation, the authors have usually set up a default profile for different specs. Each spec has its own APL for different fight types and different and for different specs. And the action priority list is literally just a list of like conditional. If this is the condition, then cast Mutilate. If this is the condition, then cast Envenom. If this is the condition, then cast Rupture. And it can get fairly complicated, these conditions, but it's just like a list of priority actions that simulation, because you're like, if at 50% energy and 5 combo points, then use this ability. Otherwise, you move to the next one in the list. But that's what that means when he says APL. That's action priority list. And that is a thing that theory crafters do. A lot of the guide writers that you see like on Wowhead and stuff, a lot of them help write. They either write or help write the APL. Like a lot of the, even just like prominent people in like your class D boards and stuff, and that they're prominent, you hear about them all the time, you see maybe they write the guides, but you don't know exactly what they do. Chances are they help with this APL, or they help work on the SimCraft itself, like actually coding the abilities and stuff, or they help with these websites and stuff like. So a lot of these authors and prominent figures in each of these communities, each of these class communities, are usually involved in these theory crafting efforts. So anyway, let's move on. That's kind of weird tangent.
And then never have to think about that again. That's a insane value proposition and something that pretty much everybody would play. And if I'm a guide writer and I'm like, actually, you probably don't have to learn anything about your rotation. Just turn on the 1-button rotation, and you're going to be better than pretty much everybody in your AOTC guild and some people in your Mythic Cutting Edge guild, and you're going to out DPS players all the way up until 15s and 16s, close to title range Mythic Plus keys. Also, imagine like you're in college, and for whatever reason, you have the ability to be able to chat GPT everything and get 85% on every single assignment ever. Or you could spend 40 hours a week and be able to get a 95%. You're not even going to get 100. You're going to get a 95% if you spend 40 hours a week as opposed to the 0 hours a week and you just utilize ChatGPT. What are you going to take and get that? Are you going to take the 85% or are you going to spend the additional 40 hours a week? No, you're taking the fucking 85% like everybody else. Like don't pretend like you're better than anybody else. That is a huge issue, and that's why I think the 1-button rotation needs to be looked.
Yeah, I think in all of this full argument, like the argument, the case that he's making right here is fully hinges on, I think, the opinion that rotations have to be the complexity that they are now, and that the game is not too complicated. Like, these people are doing crap DPS because it's hard. It's hard. And this is a social game. You can't be bad at World of Warcraft. This is a social game. There's a great video. It's called "It's Rude to Be Bad at World of Warcraft." It's a fantastic video. Being bad at World of Warcraft makes you a social pariah. If you want a social game, you need to make sure that everybody can participate. And this game has been pushing people away with its complexity.
Looked at and changed in some capacity. I don't think I would remove it. I think that for the people that actually need the accessibility, it's not bad. But one thing I will say is, and I've seen this actually from some people who don't have hands or have wrist issues and need accessibility features in World of Warcraft, they actually don't like how this functions either, because they've just taken something that is a level of gameplay for them, which is doing their rotation, and they've converted it into utilizing one singular button. And now it does increase their performance, which of course you're going to be happy about. Your performance just like went up overnight. But the way that you get the performance increase is by spamming one button, which that's not gameplay. Again, that's just not gameplay. And
just to be clear, he's absolutely correct that this is far less engaging. It's actually, the gameplay is pretty poor. Like, the rotation itself is not engaging pretty much at all when you have the single button rotation. He's absolutely right about that. The point I'm making is we need the middle ground. We need to reduce the complexity so we don't have to use the 1-button rotation. Most people can, get that extra. Let's say if they change it GCD and it's only a 10% penalty across the board, they can get that extra 10% by putting in effort to play for themselves when they need it. Or maybe they do it from fight to fight. Maybe like on a fight like Mugsy where there's a lot going on, you use the single button rotation. But if you're on Vexy, you can do your rotation, right? Because it's not too challenging. I think there's a perfect place. I think there's a place for it. I think it is a Band-Aid solution.
And I know that there's going to be some people who are arguing against it, but I really, really want to say, just kind of listen to the thought processes behind it. I know that some people are going to disagree. There is nuance to the argument, and I just wanted to present it out there, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.
All right. ChatGPT girlfriend dumped him. All right. Well, that's it. I'll link the video in the description. Make sure and go check out the video and check out Tells. He's got some good content. That 1-button rotation, he goes through a key. I think it was like a 16 or something, really high key. Well, high to me. He does a 16 and he's ranting the whole time about how ridiculous it was. It was a fun watch. I recommend you go watch it and go check him out. But again, I just want to reiterate, none of this was like meant in bad faith or animosity. There's no beef here. I'm not trying to, stir up anything at all whatsoever. We're just having a discussion about, different viewpoints about the game. So anyway, if you feel a certain way, maybe put it in a comment. Otherwise, I'll catch you guys next time. Toodaloo.